to be able to use a realistic moment from the film and then insert my own kind of graphic elements or symbolist elements to how that image is told is really where I like to go. Full steam ahead on the crazy. More to come for sure.
And now more from Greg Ruth. Was there any illustrators or artists that influenced you as a child?
Well, I grew up in Texas in a very non-art environment. So as a child, the only things I kind of knew about were really, Van Gogh at the museum or whatever was going on at the Fine Arts Museum in Houston. And they have some tremendous galleries there. The Menil Museum down there was amazing. And Magritte was a huge love of mine and still is today. I think they've got one of the largest collection of Magrittes at the Menil. They have a great Rothko chapel down there near that place as well. I used to love to go to, but it wasn't really until high school. I went to a performing and visual arts high school down there. That's when it really kind of took hold and it became kind of a launch point. It was the only thing that I did well. It really saved my life. I wasn't doing great in junior high school and really just felt lost. And I think my mom saw that the only thing I seemed to really constantly be spending my time alone in my room doing was art, was making things, drawing things, making stories, and even making little comics and stuff like that. So I think she picked up on that, made me apply to it. I got in, and it just changed my life. And there's been no looking back ever since.
Could you tell us a little bit about your process creating these pieces? Like what's involved to make these illustrations?
It all largely kind of depends on the project. Sometimes there's different stuff going into it. So like the Dune original soundtrack had me like creating my own kind of sand and spice physically and kind of, making props for that and photographing it and trying to use design elements in a way that was really interesting. There's projects where I'm hitting it from a Sumi ink kind of drawing perspective. And so I'll sit down and do that. I just did a bunch of stuff for Godzilla that was all in just big rough charcoal. So any chance to be able to kind of try something new out, I'll leap at it if I can. I get really bored with myself really quickly and always neurotically nervous about, reruns of myself. Although, which is a weird thing because in our thing, if you do something right the first time, all a lot of people want you to do is more of that. Again and again and again, not really recognizing, I think, at the end that you get this repeated diminishing returns every time you keep hitting the same trick over and over again. So sometimes I have to push back on desires to do something that isn't really compatible with anything other than just trying to draft off of the look of something else that was happening. And I get the instinct, and a lot of publishers and studios they prefer proven things. So it sometimes becomes in that way. But I'm working on a series of LP soundtracks right now that are an interesting mix of graphite drawing. I tend to always like to work practically. I'll assemble in Photoshop later and work on it. I'm not really great with color, it's just not a natural instinct for me. I tend to be very tonal thinking. I prefer black and white. I love old Carl Theodore Dreyer films. I love the old Noir. So for me, it's always about lighting and shadow and form. So color is a natural second thought, and Photoshop gives me a lot of room to really experiment with it without committing to a place where I have to keep destroying and starting from scratch. I can kind of dial back a mistake or a wrong turn, which invites more risk-taking, which creates better work. But largely, I'll always do something as much as I can practically and then scan it into a computer and then work with it on top of that. And even the colors are usually, I have a huge bank of scanned in dirt that I put on the scanner or old paper textures or watercolor washes. And then I'll use those rather than try to go to digital stuff because it tends to not mesh as well with the practical drawing. Some things can get a little bit more hyper photographic, like, I'd say a lot of the stuff for Dune and some of the things I'm working on right now. Certainly some of the work that I did for the Hot Estate was really, they were meant to look like old Polaroids. So very, very photographic and crisp in certain areas, but kind of distorted and blurred as Polaroids are in others. And that's been fun to do. And I will try to draw that as much as possible. I did a series of my own just to test out a technique of doing portraits of all the 13 people that play Doctor Who and have them get blurrier as they go down the line back in time, and trying to learn to kind of mimic photographic depth of field and blurries and distortions that can come photographically, but trying to do it with a pencil. I've done stuff like that and applied that to work a lot, drawing smoke or water or any kind of thing that seems like, in some ways there's a practical reason to do something photographically, but you don't have the kind of universal control of it. I had a gig at Criterion for a film called Breaking Point, which is an old noir. And it was one of the more, I would say, it was one of the rougher assignments from them. And by their own admitting, there was something turgid about. Basically, they had a scene from the film that they wanted to use. There were some compositional problems with the way that particular scene was shot. So what they really needed to do was have things moved around. And there was really no way to do it without redrawing it from scratch and drawing it correctly. So that was one of those incidents where a hand-drawn thing was required. And it was my ability to kind of hand draw it and make it look as close to the original screenshot as possible that allowed us to do that. We were able to compose it and work with it and edit and make that happen. You can't do that without an artist, practically working in that way. That wasn't the funnest event I had to do, but I loved the challenge of doing something like that. It was really interesting and really cool. I like the kind of intermix of when I did the work for the piano. That was another dream gig. I love Jane and her work, and especially the piano. To be able to use, a realistic moment from the film, and then insert my own kind of graphic elements or symbolist elements to how that image is told, so that it expresses more than just as what's seen on the paper, on the package that you've got, is really where I like to go. So project to project, it just depends. Whatever it demands or whatever idea it sparks in me. I'm lucky enough to have either completely insane art directors and editors, or very trusting people that kind of just say, all right, that sounds great. I don't know what you mean, and I'm a little scared, but you go for it and let me know. The Godzilla stuff, they really just let me go hog wild. I don't think that they really thought that we'd ever get approval for it from Toho, but they loved it. It's been great. So all steam, full steam ahead on the crazy. More to come for sure.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. What Godzilla was it? Was it one of the recent stuff, or it's more the classics?
No, it's all old classic stuff.
Nice.
I can't specifically say yet. One of the things in the last 6 or 8 months has been almost every project I've done is all NDA, quiet, hush-hush stuff that I have to wait for it to come out. And it's frustrating, because I'm used to comics. When you work in pamphlet, regular comic book style comics, the gratification is fairly instant. It's a rough ride. You've got a month to turn stuff in, but it hits the stands the next month, and you're able to actually hold the thing you did weeks after you turn it in. It's tremendously immediate, in that way. When I moved into books and book covers, you're looking at years before you actually can hold the thing in your hand, the project. Even by the time you're done with like a graphic novel or a book like that, there's a full calendar year before it even gets announced and then put out there. And then you have to go out and do press for it, for a project that is more than a year old for you. And you're already working on something else. And it can be hard to remember what you were thinking and doing at the time, or even feel like you even know what to say because that thing isn't so in the rear view at the point. The posters are a little bit quicker, and that's been great to see. But a lot of this stuff, since it's being tied in with specific projects that are coming out later, it requires a lot of patience. Again, it's just more uptown problems, but it's it's nice to hold the thing you make.
Oh yeah, a comic book a month. That's amazing. Could you talk a little bit more about that process, because there's so many drawings involved for just one comic?
Oh yeah, it'll kill you. So I originally I did a series of 6 men. It was a self-contained story that had never been told about the character before. I was brought in to help the artist that was working on the actual practical series, who was starting to fall behind because it's a lot to do month to month. I mean, it really is. And even though they front load And you usually want to get 2 or 3 issues in the can before you start that process. It's not hard to burn through your fat and get down to the bone real quick before the next one comes. And they were finding that they were running into that. And the last thing in comics you want to be is late turning in anything. It's not, there's a lot of practical prohibitions against that. Comics, I don't know if that's still the same, but in the direct market back in those times, if you missed your window, your comic books are returnable. So it's a way to encourage independent shops to order copies of something weird that maybe they wouldn't necessarily do. Like, they know they sell Superman, but stray bullets is like kind of a gamble for them. So they don't want to put themselves at risk for it. So they kind of give you a little bit of freebie for that. If you don't, they become returnable if you're late, and it can cost thousands and thousands of dollars to the publisher in returns that they are responsible for coming back. And I know that some companies, it's even been so bad that it's almost threatened to shut them down. I know Dark Horse went through a rough period when they had a massive returnable thing hit them. So it's a periodic industry like newspapers or magazines are. So you've really got to go, and deadlines are short. Notices are really short as well. So you've got to kind of get to it and learn to be very fast and very brief and very concise, which again, all of that is entirely great training for any other work. Because when I am doing something right now that is, we're on a hugely crunched deadline, it would have been, whereas normal guys that I think that don't have comics training will take weeks to work on a piece, I am able to get done in a couple of days and get it out because I'm so used to that kind of hyper speed, crackhead, crazy schedule. It's allowed me to kind of get going. So for Conan, the idea was to take the kind of 6-issue arc that I was doing with Kurt Busiek and break it up and use it as kind of filler. When they were suddenly found that they're getting really close to running out of runway with the ongoing team, they'll plop another one in. So it kind of showed up every 3 or 4 issues to try to keep that ball in the air, which was a very smart way, I think, to do it. And it was such a stylistically different approach. It was a nice pause, I think, for everybody, but it also didn't make you feel like that you were being forced to wait for something. You got kind of a whole other thing to do. So I had time on that. But I remember I was doing the first issue of that Conan while I was working on the last issue of Freaks of the Heartland in the same month of August. And it was a rough month trying to get to, and back then I'm doing fully painted work. I'm doing all of the kind of layout and the design. So it's really an enormous amount of time. When I moved into book publishing for The Lost Boy and then on to Inde and Meadowlark and so forth, book publishers on a yearly schedule. It's not month to month, it's yearly. So you do have time. I think we were supposed to launch Meadowlark a year earlier, and I needed more time to wrap it up. And so we bought ourselves another year. Now, all of this turned out to be a great blessing in that if we had come out the year we did, it would have died on the vine because of the pandemic. A buddy of mine I know had a book land literally the month after it broke out here, and it just swallowed. I mean, I don't think there was press. The publisher was shut down. It just ruined it. I mean, that's years of work just lost. And it would have been great if it had come out this year instead of last year, because we still didn't get a proper book tour out of it like we did with Inde. It lost a lot of ground as a result of not being able to kind of get out there. Books really benefit from that kind of hand-to-hand kind of interaction and kind of being there and finding readers and meeting them and handing out books and letting those people recommend it to 5 other people and so on and so on. You get that exponential growth, and you don't really get that with an e-marketing campaign or, Zoom stuff. But it was great. We were able to do a really great chat with Rick Linkletter for the Texas Book Festival and make it work. But I hadn't seen Ethan. It was so weird. I think it'd been a couple of years where I hadn't even physically seen him in person because of the pandemic. Well, we were still working on this project remotely. So the technology gives you that ability to do that. But at the same time, it's the lack of actual contact stinks. I think I like that part of it. I miss it. And like any book, it's always that way. You spend all this time, you make it up, and then when you get that box, from the publisher, you get your comps, you haven't seen it. You've seen proofs and you've approved of all the stuff and you hope that it works out well, but you never really know And a lot of the times there's always a certain disappointment into what you were hoping it looked like versus what it actually does look like. But Hachette and our amazing editor there, Gretchen Young over at Grand Central, I mean, the production value of both Inde and Meadowlark were just, I've never been surprised in this looks so much better than I thought it would ever or could be. And I've been getting a lot of that lately too, especially with the LP stuff we're doing, and the posters for Mondo have been breathtaking, the stuff that they do. So it's really nice to be surprised in that direction, for sure.
All right. Well, hey, Greg, thank you so much for sharing your stories and experiences and let us into your process today. And thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
It was great time to talking with you. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. Thanks.
Well, everybody, to learn more about Greg and his amazing work, make sure to check out gregthings.com, where you can view many of his illustrations and also shop for some, and so much more. And don't forget to check out his books, which are available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. All links are in the description below. You won't be disappointed. Thank you for watching the Burbank International Film Festival's Real Conversations. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And learn everything you need to know about the festival at burbankfilmfest.org. Before you go, stick around and see other videos we have to offer, like these two. Thanks for watching. See you next time.